Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Today on our podcast, Melissa, we want to talk about a new video series that we got the opportunity to start and shoot last week.
Woo!
Called Conversations With.
I'm so excited about this.
So this is going to be a little bit different than our regular podcast because we're just going to talk about that experience and some things that we learned. So there's going to be plenty of juicy nuggets in here.
Yeah, precisely.
But we wanted to start with like what this thing was, right? So we ended up shooting this video series. We sat down with someone and asked them 12 questions.
Right.
And it was really, really insightful. So our vision for this series is that we just find other people that are interesting and have maybe a different point of view than us and different experiences and chat with them. So our first guest was really amazing, and it was a really fun experience. And so I want you to tell us first how you met our first guest. Before we get into who it is and what we talked about, I just want you to tell a story about how you met this person.
You know, you're such a master storyteller, JJ. You're always so good. You're always showing me the hook.
Listen, it's like on a T-ball stand, and you're ready to go.
So my best friend and I were celebrating her birthday. It's about the exact same time of year, several years ago. And she said, hey, there's this really cool... I said, what do you want to do for your birthday? So we're having lunch and we're going to walk around the lake. And then what do you want to do? I always love to go with her and we get her a birthday gift. And she said, well, I have this really cool place I want to check out. It's called the Heart of Tibet. And it's a store in Linden Hills area. And I was like, yeah, I'm game. Let's do it. Let's go. Cool. So we walked into this store. And this store is owned by a former Buddhist monk and his wife, an American named Nancy. And his name is Tupten Dadek. And Tupten was in the store in this moment, and he walked up to me, and we are eye to eye. He's about the same height as I am. And we were eye to eye, and he looked at me, and he said, you have a monkey mind. And I was like,
what?
Oh, no. What felt really even funnier about this is that I felt like he was peering into my soul and I knew exactly what he meant. Like it was like really strange. And then he pointed to my forehead and he said, you need to quiet your mind.
Wow.
And you know how they say when you're in the presence of greatness, you know it. When you're in the presence of something very special, you can feel it. And how we always talk about how our energy is so contagious, right? Like what we put out is what people get. Well, Tupten is like the prime example of that because in his presence, you feel a calmness and a gentleness and a non-judgmental way. Like I can't describe it any better than that. And so Tupten and I began to become very good friends.
Nice.
And I've learned so much from him. And he offered, as he was listening to the self-awareness journey, because Tupten has a huge following of Tibetans and people on Facebook. And so he and I were friends on Facebook. And as he started to see the self-awareness journey stuff pop up with the videos and everything else like that, he reached out to me and he said, I think we should do something together. He said, I like your energy in this self-awareness journey. I can feel the energy in this, and I would like us to do something together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's how we got where we got.
How are you doing with that monkey mind thing?
Actually, I would say that it's now just a very small monkey. It used to be like a full-size gorilla.
So we went and picked Tupton up from the store and brought him to our studio and sat down and asked him some questions.
And I just love it too, because when we went to get him, he was armed with two things: prayer beads and a beautiful antique singing bowl, which is a Tibetan instrument that is used for meditation as well as music and sound healing and that sort of thing. So he came to our studio with those two things. And so we just were able to commence in our conversation.
Yeah. So let's just buzz through a couple of the questions we asked him. Obviously, all of this video series is on our website, so everybody can go to theselfawarenessjourney.com and watch all 12 segments. But let's talk about just a couple of them, because as I was reviewing them, it's just like I have this whole page of notes of really interesting things to think about.
Right, I know it.
So the first question we asked him was, what does meditation mean? Like, what is meditation, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because, on our podcast, we've talked a little bit about meditation, right? But we don't get into that really deep, right? And I think that certainly in our Western culture, meditation is not, something that everyone's doing, right?
No. I think it's gaining popularity, though. I think a lot more people are becoming interested in entering into the experiment.
Absolutely. I think that is definitely true. So he described meditation as a familiarity with your mind.
Yeah.
When I was reflecting on that, I was like, isn't that interesting? Like the idea that most of us are maybe just running around, not even familiar with our mind, with
what we're thinking.
Like what we feel as the thing that is us, right? I would say that everyone probably thinks that their brain or their mind is who they are, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not that familiar with it, you're kind of saying like, meditation helps you become familiar with yourself.
Yes, that's right. I loved that because I think we do just skim off the top. There's been a lot of studies that say we just think. We're thinking, I can't remember if it's like 80,000 or 100,000 thoughts per, I can't remember if it was per, it was a ridiculous number that we're constantly cycling. And I don't think we even have an awareness that we're doing it at all. And so the simple answer of just becoming familiar with your mind.
Yeah. And then he said, the more you understand your mind, the more clarity you have.
Yeah. Yes. And he used beautiful analogies so much in his speaking. He has a very thick accent. As a matter of fact, he was really concerned about his accent getting in the way of his message. And both you and I were like, oh my gosh, please don't worry about it. If we need to do subtitles, we can. We don't care about that. His energy and his language was beautiful. In that moment when he was talking about you had more clarity, remember he said it's like blue sky.
Oh, yeah.
He said it's like the clouds part and there is blue sky.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really great analogy. So with that, after that question, we asked him, like, how would someone start a practice of meditation? Because when I think about that and I think, like this means sitting on a pillow for hours, fidgeting, right? And
oming, making om sounds, whatever that means.
What do you even do? Like, I don't know where to start here. And he said, simply sit for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
5 minutes. Everyone can sit for 5 minutes.
And notice your thoughts.
Yeah. And he said there's lots of tools to help meditate, like the singing bowl that he brought.
Right.
But he said for beginners, it's easy just to focus on your breathing.
Right. Focus on your breathing, right? We keep mentioning this singing bowl. I want to just interject something. So what the singing bowl actually is it's made of a number of different metals, and each metal corresponds to one of the chakras or one of the energy pieces in your body, one of the energy segments of your body. And so the whole premise of this singing bowl it's in your hand. You hold it in your hand. It comes in a variety of sizes and tones and sounds. And then it has like a mallet. And you can softly tap that mallet, or you can run the mallet around the rim of it, sort of like, china glasses when you make them sing. And that's what it is. And he said for that purpose, you can hit that, and that noise can keep you focused. That sound, that gong sound, can help keep your mind focused, or just let you still breathe because there's something that's keeping you engaged.
Yeah, and after our interview with him, he actually, did the singing bowl.
Yeah.
Kind of around me.
Yes, he did.
Right?
That was really amazing.
And the thing that struck me about it is that it wasn't really loud. It wasn't it wasn't deafeningly loud, but the way it resonated, it was like the only thing I could hear.
Yes.
Right? It was fairly soft, but the way it vibrated, everything around me is like it was all consuming.
Yeah.
It was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that at all.
No.
As a side note, as we've always been talking about in the last several weeks about how sort of the world is amped up and people are really searching for meaning, searching for finding more balance in their lives right now. Tupten has said people are coming in his store and buying singing bowls like crazy. And I thought that was fascinating. And he had no awareness why. He was like, people are all of a sudden, like, sometimes I'm selling 4 singing bowls in an hour, and I'm not sure why. But I believe that's because that's people are connecting in that way to some, a different way to connect with themselves.
Yeah. We then asked him, how does being more mindful help? Right? As we're kind of like progressing through this idea of like, what is meditation and how do you start? That gets into mindful. And he said that mindfulness helps you remember how your life is precious.
Yes.
Remember him talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, he's talked a lot about just remembering how precious life is.
And that's the word that he used. And it was so beautiful how he would use that word. Yeah, and how when you focus on how precious everything about your life is right now, you're not focusing on the past, about what's happened. You're not getting too far ahead and getting anxious about what could be.
Yep.
You're simply staying very present and recognizing how precious your life is.
Yeah, and he talked about how that will cause you to be less affected by external things.
Yes.
Which is, I like the way he phrased that.
That was so good, wasn't it? I forgot he said that. Yeah.
Yeah. When we were talking about mindfulness, we also started talking about the connection to the universe. Because all of these things, like, it was becoming clear that everything is all connected, right?
Yeah.
And so he was talking, when we talked about meditation and mindfulness and the mind and, and then we even talked about things like karma and delusion and things. And it was really all centered around this idea of interconnection. We did a whole, he talked a lot about interconnection and understanding that everything is connected.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved one of the things, and this was your idea, JJ. I thought it was such a brilliant one, was to ask him a number of questions just about like Buddhist beliefs, you know, because we don't have, how do you learn about that stuff in an open-ended way where there's not judgment or you don't feel like you have no idea where to start on something so deep. And I just loved how, you know, through you asking some just general questions like that, like, what does it mean what does karma mean from your perspective? What does human suffering mean, you know, and how he was able to talk about that, but just in a real, just again, like we always say, put the cookies on the bottom shelf sort of way.
Well, that's another thing I thought was really fascinating is everything he talked about, every deep question we asked him was just met with like a very simple, well-reasoned view of things.
Right.
It's not complicated. He didn't have fancy scriptures or any complicated ways of explaining anything. Everything he explained and all the analogies he used were extremely simple.
Right. Yeah, I know it. And I loved how every time we would ask him something, he would just sit quietly for a moment. You know, he didn't have what a lot of people do when they're asked a question or where they're being interviewed, where they feel the need to just start going.
Yeah.
He was just very mindful, quiet,
Yep.
you know, reflective, and then he would just speak this eloquent description and very simple explanation of really deep topics.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned karma. Like I didn't really know much about karma or exactly, you know, how I don't know how I would explain it to somebody else very well, but he did a really good job of explaining karma. You know, just simply it's the result of your actions.
Yes, both positive and negative.
Yep. And that actions in a previous life maybe are affecting your current life, or actions in this life will affect something in the future. Yeah.
I mean, I think as Americans, we're always joking about karma. Like, I think everybody, if you ever hear about karma, you don't hear people using it not as often, talking about it as seriously. You hear people talking about it more like jokingly, you know?
Yeah, and more like
kitschy, sort of.
Almost like in a good luck kind of way.
Yeah.
You know, but for Tupten obviously it's like a very serious, very serious, like your actions are very important.
Yes, always.
You know?
Yeah.
One of the questions I thought we were getting a little deeper, right? And the one I really sat and thought a lot about after was he kept on talking about how we all have a delusion. He kept on saying we have a deluded mind. And what he's saying is like an illusion. Like what we see is an illusion.
Yeah.
Right? And he said, we see things that are not there.
Yes. Yes, he did. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And that was really interesting to me because the idea that, you know, unless our minds are calm, if our minds are kind of racing all the time, the mind is kind of making stuff up.
Yep.
Right? Because in the absence of like information, we do a pretty good job, actually a really good job of making stuff up.
Yeah.
And that's
really elaborate stories.
And that's the illusion he's talking about, that we're making things up and we're believing that they're true when they're just simply not true, not there.
Yep.
And that makes me really think about like almost like the reliability of my own mind. Like, can I trust it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty deep topic.
That is a deep topic, but it's fascinating because we talk about it, and we've talked in previous podcasts about how when we're not aware, the brain takes over and we start to tell ourselves stories. We tell stories about everything we see. We convince ourselves that all of our future is based on what's happened in our past because that's what we've thought about the most. And we have beliefs that are based on thinking the same thing multiple times. Whether it's true, not true, right or wrong is irrelevant.
Yep. Yeah, he also talked about how we have a delusion that our lives in the future will somehow be better or worse.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, you there's no way you can know that. Like you can't know that. That's a delusion. That you think, the future will make you happier for some reason.
Right.
And things like the delusion that that if I only had a bigger car, a better job, my life would be better. And he talked about that as a really big, story that we're telling ourselves.
And I really like how he tied that back to, because then we started sort of tiptoeing around, well, so are you saying that we're not supposed to want things? We're not supposed to, right?
I wouldn't say tiptoeing. I directly asked him, does that mean we shouldn't pursue things? Right? And, I've dabbled in pacifism before, just I don't care, want anything. But I thought that was really interesting, right? Like, okay, so if this idea of desire and wanting things and thinking about the future is causing the unhappiness, if we just don't care about anything, then what happens, right?
Yeah.
And he said that pursuing things is not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Like, it's good to pursue things, but he was very clear about your intention.
Yes, I was just going to go there. Yes, it was all about what is the intention behind your action.
Yep. And, he used an analogy that, you could have two doctors, right?
Yeah.
One doctor is a doctor because he wants the sports car and the fancy house and all,
and the title
all that,
and everything,
and the title, ego. Right? And you've got one doctor whose intent is simply to save lives and help people. Those are two very different energies and very different intentions.
Yes. Yep. That would be another example of how it was just such a simple answer. We try to complicate everything, and we try to put everything into a judgment and a competition, like, should I have more or less, and how much money should I make, and does it matter, and how do I tell people how much money I make, or how do I tell people how much I don't want them to know? We get caught up in all this stuff, and he's really saying none of that really matters. It just simply matters is, what is your intention? The actions that you're doing, what's the intention behind it? I loved that, and that again requires real presence.
Yeah.
Awareness.
Right. In the moment. And it's really amazing.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking of that, we asked him about attachment, right? Because I think probably most of us have heard about the idea of attachment. Like, we're attached to things.
Yeah.
Just like we were talking about, which is, like, if I lose my fancy car, if I lose my house, or if I lose someone in my life, that will bring sadness. Right?
Yep.
And that's also a heavy topic. And so he talked about that there was two types of attachment. One type, which is self-focused, it's to things, to people. It's like all about you. And the second one was attachment to love and all beings.
That's right.
And I always thought of attachment as generally a negative thing, but he said there's two attachments. One's negative and one's positive. And that second attachment is the one you should work on.
Yep. Yeah, it was a fascinating afternoon we got to spend with Tupten, and his very next question that he asked, so he followed up with me a day later, and the very next, and I sent him a couple of the segments because I wanted to make sure that he was comfortable and, he was good with everything. And his immediate response was a bit like, I wasn't clear enough here. I really want to be clear in this piece and that piece. And I think what will eventually happen is we will probably spend time with him again.
I think so. So Actually, there's one last question we asked them that I think we should end on.
Oh, I hope it's the same
Here.
one I think too.
Do you have advice for people who worry or have anxiety?
Yes, that was
Right.
exactly what I was
Because we
thinking.
thought that with everything going on in the world, let's just get down to like, what can we do
Right now.
Right now. And he had a beautiful analogy for this one.
He did. He stopped, and it was just like you asked him that question, and it was so neat to watch it from behind the screen, behind the camera, because his eyes are very loving, and he answered in a very loving way. He said, "Life is so precious," and he said, "I've mentioned it before, but if you can really focus on how beautiful your life is. Your body, everything about your life is precious, and you only want to put precious things into it." He said, your body is like a gold bowl. You only want to fill it with beautiful things, including thoughts and food and everything, and to stay very much present, having that awareness. And then he used his own personal example by when he left Tibet. He was 7 or 8, as I mentioned, or I may not, I guess I haven't mentioned it, but he was 7 or 8 when he left Tibet because his family was fleeing on foot over Mount Everest. And they were a family that had things in Tibet. They had animals, they had land, they had a nice home, and they lost all of it in the moment. And he said sometimes he feels sad when he reflects back on that. But what he does is he recognizes how precious life is. And he is so much better now in this moment than he was back then. So that was really his strong message for all of us, is to recognize how precious our lives are.
Absolutely beautiful. So again, all these are on our website, theselfawarenessjourney.com. So go there and check them out.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.